I haven't slept through the night since the day we buried him. And when I say him, I mean a baby Bigfoot. Yes, Bigfoot, Sasquatch, whatever you want to call what lives in these mountains. I don't care if that ruins this for you. I don't care what you believe about Bigfoot's existence. I'm telling you what happened when my family found an orphaned Bigfoot infant in our woods and raised him in secret for 6 years and 4 months, until hunters killed him while we listened to him call for us in the dark. My name is Thomas Reed. I'm 71 years old, retired biology teacher, and I'm recording this testimony because I'm dying. Pancreatic cancer, stage 4. They gave me 3 months. That was 2 months ago. Before I go, I need the world to know the truth about Bigfoot. Not the monster from campfire stories, not the blurry figure in grainy footage. The real Bigfoot, the one we raised as our son, the one who learned our names, the one who died calling for his mother while hunters laughed. This is what they don't want you to hear. This is why Bigfoot stays hidden. And this is what happens when decent people try to protect something the world wants dead or in a cage. Before you judge what we did, you need to understand who we are. We're not crazy conspiracy theorists. We weren't Bigfoot hunters with cameras and night vision equipment. We didn't go into the woods trying to prove Sasquatch exists for YouTube views or book deals. What happened to us started with gunshots on our property. It started with a sound like an infant dying in the trees. And it started with us trying to do something we thought was decent, something we thought was right. I didn't know yet that decency can get you killed when Bigfoot is involved. I didn't know that trying to save a life could cost you everything. I taught biology at our local high school for 32 years. Spent my career teaching kids about taxonomy, evolution, animal behavior. I taught them that science is about observation, evidence, careful documentation. I taught them that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. I never thought I'd be the one making the extraordinary claim. I never thought I'd be the one holding evidence I couldn't share with anyone. When I retired at 65, my wife Evelyn and I moved to 20 acres in the Cascade foothills of the Pacific Northwest, about 20 minutes past the last gas station, right up against state forest land. If you know the area, you know what I mean. If you don't, picture this. Dark green and gray everything, mountains rising up like walls, forests so thick you can walk 10 feet off a trail and disappear completely. It's the kind of place where people go missing, where hikers vanish, where hunters don't come back. The kind of place where, if you believe the stories, Bigfoot lives. I didn't believe the stories. Not then. If you've never experienced late October in the Pacific Northwest, it's hard to explain what the air feels like. Everything turns dark green and gray and brown. By 4 in the afternoon, it already looks like evening. The clouds sit so low you feel like you could reach up and touch them. Rain doesn't fall, it hangs in the air, soaking everything slowly. That's hunting season out here. Elk, mostly, black-tailed deer, black bear if you're lucky. You hear rifle shots constantly. 3 shots in the morning, 2 at dusk, 1 random shot at 2 in the afternoon that makes you wonder what somebody saw. We got used to it over the years. Became background noise, like traffic in the city. We run a small operation on our property. Nothing fancy, nothing that would make us rich. We've got a house, 2-bedroom, 1 bath, wood stove that heats the whole place if you feed it right. A barn that's more patch than original wood at this point. A shop where I do repairs, and Caleb works on equipment. And attached to the shop, a small market where we sell to locals and the occasional lost tourist. We sell eggs from our chickens. We keep about 30 hens, good layers. Jerky that Evelyn makes from our beef calves, seasoned with her grandmother's recipe that she won't share with anyone, not even me. Baked goods, bread, rolls, pies when berries are in season. Evelyn makes ammunition too. Reloads brass for hunters who know quality when they see it. We stock grain, dog food, basic supplies. Some produce in summer when our garden cooperates. We keep chickens, like I said, goats for milk and meat, a couple beef calves that we rotate through. Nothing fancy. We're not rich. We work every day. Our hands are calloused. Our backs hurt. We go to bed tired and wake up with a list of things that need fixing. We're not special people. That matters. I need you to understand that we're just normal, as far as normal exists anymore. We're not connected to Bigfoot research organizations. We don't go to cryptozoology conferences. We don't have subscriptions to Sasquatch magazines or websites. Before all this happened, if you'd asked me about Bigfoot, I would have said what I told my students. Interesting folklore, no credible evidence, probably a combination of misidentification and human pattern recognition making us see faces in the forest. I would have been wrong. Evelyn is 67 now. We've been married 43 years. Met when I was teaching summer school, and she was working at the library. She had dark hair back then, wore it long. Now it's gray, and she keeps it short because, as she says, I don't have time for vanity when goats need milking. We couldn't have biological children. That's a pain that doesn't go away, no matter how many years pass. She carried twice, lost both pregnancies in her 30s. The first at 12 weeks. The second at 19 weeks, far enough along that we'd told people, picked out names, started thinking about cribs and car seats and all the things you think about. That second loss nearly destroyed her. Destroyed us, really. We almost didn't make it through that year, but we did, somehow. We held on to each other when nothing else made sense. We ended up adopting 2 older kids. Not babies. People don't place babies with couples our age who live this far from civilization. They give you the kids nobody else wants. The teenagers with histories. The ones who've been through the system and come out angry or scared or broken. We got Caleb first. He was 15 when he came to us, almost 16. He'd been in 7 foster homes before us. 7. He came with a garbage bag of clothes, a bad attitude, and eyes that looked about 40 years old. He's 29 now. Stayed with us. Works the place. Runs, feed deliveries to neighbors. Keeps our ancient tractor running with duct tape, prayer, and what I suspect is actual magic. He's got a girlfriend now. Talks about maybe getting married, maybe having kids of his own. He's our son, period. I don't say adopted son or foster son. He's our son. Then later we brought home Hannah. She was 9, looked about 6, because she was so small and thin. She'd been removed from her biological home for reasons that were in the file, reasons I won't repeat here because they're hers to tell or not tell. She came to us angry at the world, angry at every adult who'd ever let her down, which was basically all of them. She's 23 now, does everything around here, runs the cash register, takes care of the animals, drives into town at 5 in the morning to buy day-old bread from the bakery that we resell for profit. She's tough as nails. Will give you the sharp edge of her tongue if you try to pull any nonsense with her. But she'll also give you her last $20 if you need it, and she thinks you're genuine. She's our daughter. Ours. We are not special people. We're not heroes. We're not saints. We're just a family that got put together in an unconventional way and decided to make it work. That's who we were on October 23rd, when Bigfoot changed everything. It was a Sunday. I remember because we'd been to the early service at the little church in town, the one that meets in the community center, because they can't afford a real building. We'd come home, changed into work clothes. It was cold that day. Damp. Classic late October hunting weather in the Cascades. I was out behind the shop sharpening the splitter blades for firewood season. We still had about 3 cords to split before the real cold hit. Soup was on the stove inside Evelyn's venison stew, the kind that simmers for hours and makes the whole house smell like comfort. Evelyn was on the front porch in her rocking chair, snapping green beans from the last of the garden, listening to an audiobook through her headphones. It was one of those quiet, peaceful afternoons where you're not thinking about anything except the work in front of you and whether you remembered to put the bread in the oven and if the damn tractor is going to start tomorrow or if it's finally going to die for good. A normal afternoon. The kind of afternoon where nothing significant ever happens. Then we heard 3 shots. Not small caliber, not .22 plinking, heavy rifle fire, probably 308 or 30-06, the kind of caliber you use for elk or bear. 3 fast shots. Boom, boom, boom. Close together. Close. Too close. Evelyn stood up so fast her rocking chair kept going, beans spilling everywhere. She pulled out her headphones and looked at me across the yard, and I saw alarm in her face. "That's inside our fence," she said. "Our 20 acres back up against state forest land. Our north property line is clearly posted with bright orange, no trespassing signs every 50 feet. Everyone local knows the rule, the unspoken agreement that keeps neighbors civil out here. You don't shoot inside someone else's fence. You step over the property line onto state land, then you shoot. That's how it's always been. These shots weren't on state land. These shots violated that rule. These shots were definitely on our property. They're on our side, I said. I was already moving toward the shop, toward where we keep the shotgun. Then we heard something that changed our lives forever. A sound I don't have perfect words for. People always want me to say it was a scream, or a roar, or a howl. It wasn't any of those things exactly. It sounded like something trying to scream while drowning. Low at first, deep and resonant, like it came from a huge chest cavity. Then breaking higher, cracking into something that sounded almost human, almost like a woman screaming, but not quite. Not quite human. The sound of pain. The sound of terror. The sound of something dying. That sound went through Evelyn like an electric shock. I saw her whole body go rigid. She grabbed my sleeve as I walked past, fingers digging in hard enough to hurt. "Tom," she said, just my name, but I heard everything underneath it. Fear, urgency. "Go." "Stay here," I told her. I grabbed our pump-action shotgun from the shop. We keep it mainly for coyotes that get too interested in the chickens, sometimes for black bears that get into the trash. I checked that it was loaded. It was. I headed toward the trees behind the north pasture, following the direction those shots had come from. I wasn't thinking about Bigfoot or Sasquatch or cryptids or anything supernatural. I was thinking trespassers. I was thinking drunk out-of-town hunters who didn't respect posted property. I was already rehearsing in my head what I was going to say when I found them. Something about respecting boundaries and reading signs and how I could press charges if I wanted to, which I probably wouldn't, but they didn't need to know that. I wasn't scared. I was irritated, annoyed, righteously indignant about people not respecting our land. I should have been scared. I crossed our north fence line barbed wire, 4 strands, with those bright orange signs zip-tied every 50 feet, and entered the tree line. The temperature dropped immediately, the way it does when you step from open ground into deep forest. The smell changed. Pine pitch, wet earth, moss, decomposing, leaves and standing water, and something else, something sharper. Gunpowder, that acrid smell of recently fired ammunition, and hot metal. That specific smell you only get when a rifle barrel has been fired multiple times and hasn't had time to cool down yet. I stopped, listened, heard nothing except rain dripping from branches, no voices, no movement, just that heavy Pacific Northwest silence that feels like being inside a cathedral made of trees. I moved forward carefully now. Started seeing boot prints in the mud, heavy tread, deep impressions. 2 different sets, 2 different boot patterns. Adult men, probably over 200 pounds each, moving fast based on the stride length and how the mud had been kicked up, and drag marks. Long grooves through the pine needles and moss where something heavy had been pulled. The grooves were wide. Whatever they'd been dragging was big. I followed the drag marks. They went about 40 yards, winding through trees, following the path of least resistance. Then the drag marks just stopped. The boot prints continued for another 10 feet. Milling around in a small area like the men had been discussing something. Then the boot prints turned back toward the access road that runs along the eastern edge of state land and disappeared. They'd gone to get help, to get more people, more equipment. They were coming back. I followed where the drag marks ended. Up over a small rise, down into a little mossy depression that I'd probably walked past 100 times in my life and never really noticed. Just a low spot where water collected, where moss grew thick and soft, where ferns clustered around a fallen log that was more rot than wood at this point. That's where I found what Bigfoot researchers have been searching for their entire lives, what they've spent millions of dollars trying to prove, what they've dedicated careers to documenting. I found a dead Bigfoot lying in our woods. When I first saw her, my brain tried desperately to make sense of it, tried to categorize it into something familiar, something known. My biology teacher brain was screaming beer, because that was the closest match. Large mammal, dark fur, forest habitat. Had to be a bear, but my eyes were sending back information that didn't match. Wrong shape, wrong proportions, wrong everything. This wasn't a bear. This was a female Bigfoot, a Sasquatch mother, a creature that according to mainstream science doesn't exist. She was on her side, curled in a protective position. Her back was toward me. Her body was massive. I'm 6'1" and weigh about 190 pounds, and she was bigger than me by a significant margin. If I had to guess, I'd say she was maybe 6.5, almost 7 feet tall if she'd been standing, and probably weighed close to 400 pounds. Her hair was dark brown, almost black where it was wet, soaked through with rain and blood. Not fur like you see on a black bear where each hair is coarse and individual. This looked more like thick human hair, just denser, covering most of her body in a continuous coat. Long strands hanging in matted clumps from the rain. Where the hair was thinner across her back, down her sides, you could see skin underneath. The skin wasn't pink like human skin or black like bear skin. It was grayish, with a texture that looked thick and tough, but also flexible. It looked like very tough human skin, not animal hide. You could see where individual hairs grew from follicles. You could see pores, skin texture. High in her ribs, on the right side, there were 2 bullet holes close together, maybe 3 inches apart. Entry wounds. Clean holes punched through hair and skin and into vital organs underneath. The ground beneath her was dark with blood, soaking into the moss, spreading out in a slowly expanding circle. Her arm was extended out in front of her. Not a foreleg, not a paw, an arm. I could see the shoulder joint, the bicep, the elbow, the forearm, the wrist. The anatomical structure was unmistakably similar to a human arm, just larger, more robust, proportioned differently. And at the end of that arm, a hand. I will never forget that Bigfoot hand. The palm was huge, maybe 8-9 inches across, wide enough that if she'd placed it flat on a table, it would have covered a dinner plate. The fingers were long, maybe 5 or 6 inches from palm to tip, longer than human fingers proportionally. The thumb was positioned similarly to a human thumb, not like a bear's dew claw. The nails were thick and dark, curved slightly, worn at the tips like she'd been using her hands to dig or climb or manipulate objects. That hand was relaxed in the moss, palm up, fingers slightly curled. Exactly the way a person's hand would fall if they died in that position. That's when I stopped walking. That's when my brain started to catch up to what my eyes were seeing. I couldn't make this fit anything I'd learned in 32 years of teaching biology. I couldn't make it fit into any category I knew. This was something outside the textbooks, something outside mainstream scientific consensus. This was Bigfoot, real, physical, dead Bigfoot, lying in our woods with 2 bullet holes in her chest and blood soaking into the moss. My hands started shaking. My heart was slamming in my chest. Part of me wanted to run. Another part wanted to get closer, to document this, to touch it, to verify that it was real and not some stress-induced hallucination. Then I heard something that made all those thoughts disappear. Behind the Bigfoot mother's body, something moved. Something made a sound. A broken, hiccuping sob, wet, desperate, the way an infant cries after they've been crying for so long they've exhausted themselves, and all that's left is shaking and involuntary vocalizations. The sound an infant makes when they know their mother is gone and they don't understand why she won't wake up. I moved slowly, carefully, where I could see past the mother Bigfoot's shoulder. A baby Bigfoot was pressed tight against his mother's stomach, trying to burrow under her arm like he could climb inside her and hide. His face was buried against her. One small hand, still huge compared to a human infant's hand, but small compared to his mother's, was gripping her hair. His entire body was shaking so violently I could see it from 10 feet away. He was making that sound, that breaking, sobbing sound that hit me somewhere deep in my chest and made it hard to breathe. Then he turned and looked at me. This is what a baby Bigfoot looks like, what a young Sasquatch looks like, what the real thing looks like. Not the costumes or CGI or artistic interpretations. He looked like a terrified child. His eyes were the first thing I noticed, the thing that hit me hardest. They were huge, disproportionately large for his face, the way young mammals' eyes are always too big before they grow into them. Dark brown, almost black, wet with tears or rain or both. Human-like in a way that made my stomach clench. Not animal eyes, not the flat, predatory eyes of a bear or cougar. These eyes were expressive, emotional, aware. These eyes were looking at me and seeing me, not just detecting movement or assessing threat level. These eyes were intelligent. His face was broader than a human child's, flatter through the nose and mouth. The nose was wide with large nostrils, positioned more forward than a human nose, but not protruding like a muzzle. The mouth was wider than human proportions, lips thicker. There was a slight protrusion to the jaw, more forward than human, but not like an ape. There was hair across his cheeks and forehead, but it was much thinner than his mother's coat, almost downy. Around his eyes and nose and mouth, the hair was sparse enough that you could clearly see the skin underneath. That skin had texture, pores, fine lines, variation in tone. It wasn't the smooth skin of a doll or mask. It was real skin, with real texture and real imperfections. The skin there looked more like human skin than anything else I could compare it to. Not an animal's muzzle, not a dog's or bear's face. Closer to human than to anything else. The hair covering the rest of him was dark brown, soaked through with rain, stuck together in clumps. You could still see the shape of his body underneath. He had a neck, shoulders, a chest that rose and fell rapidly with his panicked breathing, a rounded belly like young mammals have. His arms and legs were visible, bent and curled as he pressed against his mother. His hands were disproportionately large for his size, already as big as a human adult's hands, even though he was clearly young. Long fingers, thick nails, opposable thumb, hands that could grip and manipulate objects. In terms of size, he was hard to gauge exactly because he was curled up and partially hidden, but I'd estimate he was maybe 3 feet tall if he stood upright, probably 60 or 70 pounds. Bigger than a human toddler, smaller than a human 10-year-old, built completely differently than either. Broader through the chest and shoulders, more robust bone structure, built for strength rather than the rangy build of human children. This baby Bigfoot was staring directly at me with those enormous, intelligent, terrified eyes. His whole body was trembling violently. His breathing was rapid and shallow, too fast, the kind of breathing that happens during acute stress or panic. He made a sound in his throat, a soft, almost musical hum. Then he clicked his tongue rapidly against the roof of his mouth. Tick, 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 fast, urgent. That clicking became important later. That was his first word to me, in a way. That was Bigfoot language for distress, for fear, for help me. I'm scared. I don't know what's happening. My hands went up instinctively, palms forward. The universal gesture. I'm not a threat. I'm not reaching for anything. I'm showing you my empty hand. It's okay, I said quietly. My voice came out rougher than I expected. It's okay, buddy. He stared at me with those huge eyes, made that clicking sound again, slower this time, still scared but watching, assessing, trying to understand if I was danger or something else. Behind me, something crashed through the brush, heavy footsteps not trying to be quiet. I spun around, bringing the shotgun up halfway before I recognized the sound. Evaine. She'd followed me anyway because of course she had. Because in 43 years of marriage, I should have known that stay there has never once worked when she thought I might need help. She came through the trees, breathing hard, hair plastered to her head from rain, her barn coat soaked through. She stopped when she saw me, opened her mouth to say something. Then her eyes tracked past me to the scene in the depression. She saw the dead Bigfoot mother, saw the baby Bigfoot pressed against her body, saw the blood and the bullet holes, and the little figure shaking and making that heartbreaking sound. Her expression changed, her whole face changed in a way I've only seen twice in our marriage. Once when we signed Caleb's adoption papers, and they handed us a teenager who looked at us like he expected us to send him back any second. Once when we signed Hannah's papers and she climbed into Evelyn's lap and finally let herself cry. This was the third time. This was Evelyn seeing something that needed her and deciding without hesitation that she was going to do whatever it took. She didn't scream, didn't gasp, didn't ask me what it was or if I was seeing what she was seeing. She just said, steadily, calmly, with absolute certainty, "That's a baby." Not, "What is that Bigfoot thing?" Not, "Oh my God, is that real?" Just, "That's a baby." 3 words that carried everything. That carried all the loss of 2 pregnancies, all the years of wanting to hold an infant and say, "Mama's here, you're safe, I've got you." All the mothering instinct that had never gotten the chance to attach to a newborn. You have to understand what those words meant coming from her, what they carried. Evelyn never got to bring a baby home from the hospital, never got to do midnight feedings or change diapers or rock an infant to sleep. By the time Caleb and Hannah came to us, they were old enough to make their own sandwiches and do their own laundry. We got to parent them, yes, but we never got those early years, those first moments of attachment and bonding until she met this baby Bigfoot. She moved past me slowly, carefully. Hands visible, body language calm. She was making herself small, non-threatening, the way you approach a frightened animal or a traumatized child. She crouched low so she wouldn't appear as large, kept her body angled so the baby Bigfoot could still see his mother's body, still have that visual anchor even though his mother was gone. The baby Bigfoot pressed his face back against his dead mother, shaking harder now. The fast tick-tick-tick sounds intensified. Panic clicking. Bigfoot distress language that needed no translation. Anyone who heard that sound would know immediately what it meant. "I'm terrified. I need help. Where is safety?" Evelyn spoke in a voice I hadn't heard in years. Soft, warm, instinctive. The voice that lives somewhere in women who've carried babies, who've lost babies, who know what it means to comfort something small and helpless. "Baby," she whispered. The word came out gentle, careful. Hey, sweetheart, look at me. Hey." The baby Bigfoot peeked at her, just his eyes at first, watching warily over his mother's shoulder. "There you are," Evelyn whispered. "Hi, baby, hi." Her hand reached out slowly, but she didn't touch the baby Bigfoot first. She placed her hand on the mother Bigfoot's shoulder instead, on that massive shoulder that was already cooling, already stiffening with death. You don't touch someone's baby without showing respect to the parent first. It doesn't matter if that parent is human or Sasquatch or anything else. You acknowledge the parent. You show respect to the one who brought this baby into the world and loved it and died trying to protect it. Evelyn pressed her fingers against that shoulder, feeling for any sign of life even though we both already knew. She was checking for a pulse that wasn't there, for breath that had stopped, for any indication that this Bigfoot mother might still be alive and might wake up and reclaim her baby. She swallowed hard. Later she told me she could already feel how cool the body was, how the blood had stopped flowing, how the eyes had that cloudy film that comes after death, how there was no twitch, no reflexive movement, nothing. The mother Bigfoot was gone. Had probably been gone within seconds of those bullets tearing through her chest and into her lungs and heart. "Come here," Evelyn whispered to the baby, her voice cracked slightly on the words. "Come here, sweetheart, come on, it's okay, you're okay." She opened her arms, just held them open, waiting, letting him decide. The baby Bigfoot didn't move at first, stayed pressed against his mother, gripping her hair, that small Bigfoot hand holding on like if he held tight enough she might wake up. Evelyn waited. Didn't rush, didn't grab, just kept her arms open and kept talking in that soft, steady voice. "It's okay, baby. Come on, come here. Mama's got you. Come on." Then the baby Bigfoot moved. He crawled toward her fast, the way frightened children move when they finally trust someone to catch them, moving on both hands and feet, staying low to the ground. He wasn't clumsy or awkward. His body knew exactly how to move. Young Bigfoot are built to climb and scramble and navigate rough terrain. He moved with perfect body awareness, perfect coordination, perfectly balanced even though he was terrified. He climbed right into Evelyn's arms, wrapped those long Bigfoot arms around her neck, face buried in her collar, pressing his whole body against her like he was trying to disappear into her skin. Then he shook so violently that Evelyn's shoulders bounced with the force of it, his whole body convulsing with fear and grief and stress, making that sobbing, hiccuping sound directly against Evelyn's neck. She pulled her barn coat around him to shield him from the rain, wrapped both arms around this baby Bigfoot, and held him tight the way you hold a child who's lost everything. "I've got you," she whispered. "I've got you, baby. You're okay. You're safe. I've got you." I stepped up beside them, put my hand on his back carefully, slowly, giving him time to register the touch and decide if it was okay. He tensed under my palm like he might bolt, might scramble out of Evelyn's arms and run. His breathing hitched, stopped for half a second. Then he leaned into my palm, pressed back against my hand like seeking contact, seeking reassurance that there were two of them now, two adults saying, "You're safe." That's when I felt his body heat. This baby Bigfoot was burning up, not with fever, with stress, with pure adrenaline flooding his system. His whole body was running hot from panic and terror and the physiological response to watching his mother die and not understanding why she wouldn't wake up. His heart was racing. I could feel it against my palm, racing so fast I couldn't count individual beats. "It's okay," I told this infant Sasquatch. My throat felt tight. "You're okay now, buddy. We've got you. You're safe." He made that tiny hum again. The soft, musical sound. I felt it through my palm, felt it resonating in his chest. That hum traveled up my arm, into my wrist, settled somewhere in my own chest. That hum wasn't just sound. It was vibration. It was communication. It was him saying, in Bigfoot language, in Sasquatch words, we could feel rather than translate, safe, pack, family. Okay, right then, in that moment, this baby Bigfoot believed us. He believed we would keep him safe. He believed we were the new adults in his world. He believed that somehow, impossibly, against all odds, he'd found family again. And God help us, we were about to try to keep that promise. Now, why didn't we immediately call the authorities about finding Bigfoot? Why didn't we dial 911 and report that we'd discovered proof of Sasquatch's existence right here in our woods? Here's why. The men who shot the mother Bigfoot, I could see their boot prints clear as day in the mud. I could see where they'd tried to drag this massive Bigfoot body and couldn't manage it alone because she weighed close to 400 pounds and dead weight is nearly impossible to move even for strong men. I could see where they'd given up, where they'd stood and talked it over, where their boot prints turned back toward the access road. They were coming back, with more people, with equipment, with rope and a winch and maybe an ATV or side-by-side that could haul that much weight. They were absolutely coming back to collect their Bigfoot trophy. And if they came back and found the mother Bigfoot's body gone, if they found her grave disturbed, if they found any sign that someone had interfered with their kill, they would start looking for who took it. They would start asking questions, making accusations, and that trail would lead directly, inevitably, back to us, to the property owners whose land this happened on. If they came back and found the mother Bigfoot still there and found this baby Bigfoot still crying over her body, they were taking both. You know that. I know that. They'd already shot the mother. They'd already committed to this. Finding a live baby Bigfoot would be even better than a dead adult. More valuable. More marketable. Living proof instead of a corpse that might be questioned or dismissed. And if we called the sheriff's office to report finding Bigfoot, to tell them there was a dead Sasquatch and a live baby in our woods, you think the sheriff would protect this infant? You think he'd call it in as a wildlife situation and let nature take its course? No. He'd call the state. The state would call federal agencies, fish and wildlife. Maybe the FBI if they thought there was jurisdiction. Maybe university researchers, maybe private interests with government connections. And this baby Bigfoot would be taken, immediately, within hours. They'd bag him up, transport him somewhere, put him in a facility, a cage, a cell, an enclosure with cameras and scientists and people in lab coats taking samples and running tests and documenting every measurement and behavior and biological function. This infant Sasquatch would spend whatever remained of his life sedated or restrained in some government or private research facility that we'd never be allowed to visit, never be allowed to verify his treatment, never be allowed to ensure he was being handled humanely. He'd become property, a specimen, subject BF01 or Sasquatch male, juvenile, or whatever clinical designation they'd assign. He'd never climb another tree, never feel rain on his face, never have the simple dignity of being alive and free, even if he was alone. And if we left him there in the woods, crying over his mother's body, he'd die there within days, maybe hours. He was young, dependent. He needed care and feeding and protection. Without his mother, without his family group, this baby Bigfoot would die of exposure or dehydration or because he didn't know how to find food on his own yet. So the choice wasn't really a choice at all. Evelyn made the decision for all of us. She stood up, adjusting her grip on this baby Bigfoot to support his weight better. He wrapped tighter around her, face still buried against her neck, still shaking. She looked at me with an expression that meant, "This is happening and I need you with me." Then she walked over to the mother Bigfoot's body, knelt down again, carefully, keeping the baby secure in one arm. She placed her free hand on the mother's massive shoulder, pressed down firmly, a gesture of respect and promise. "I'll take care of him," Evelyn whispered to the dead Bigfoot mother. Her voice broke on the words, "I swear to you, I'll take care of your baby. I promise." Then she stood and turned and started walking toward our house, holding this baby Bigfoot like he was the most precious thing in the world. Like he was the infant she'd never gotten to bring home from the hospital. Like he was hers now, and she'd fight anything and anyone who tried to take him. I stayed behind in the woods because there was one more thing that had to be done before those hunters returned with equipment and help. We had to bury the mother Bigfoot. I ran back to our property as fast as I could manage without losing my footing on the wet forest floor. Burst out of the trees by the north pasture. Caleb was standing by the barn, clearly worried because he'd heard the shots and then the screaming, and then nothing for too long. "Caleb," I yelled, "get the shovels, and the big tarp, now, move." He didn't ask why. That's one thing I'll always appreciate about that boy. When you give him that tone, that urgency, he doesn't stand there asking questions or demanding explanations. He just moves. He disappeared into the shop and came back 30 seconds later with 2 long-handled shovels and our heavy canvas tarp that we use for covering firewood. His face was set, ready for whatever insanity I was about to lead him into. We went back together, moved fast. I didn't explain on the way there. Didn't have breath to waste. We reached the depression. He saw the body. Caleb stopped walking like he'd hit an invisible wall. His eyes went huge. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. "No way," he finally whispered. Is that Dad? Is that Bigfoot?" "Yes," I said, short, clipped, no time for the existential crisis we were both having. "And we need to bury her before the men who shot her come back with help. So pick up that shovel and dig." "Jesus Christ," he breathed. But he picked up the shovel. "I won't give you every detail of burying a Bigfoot. I won't describe how heavy she was, how hard it was to maneuver that body even with 2 of us. I won't describe the sounds or the smells or the way her skin felt under our hands when we had to grab and pull and roll. What I will tell you is this: she wasn't easy. She was massive, dead weight, 400 pounds of cooling flesh and matted hair. We spread the tarp next to her, spent 10 minutes maneuvering her onto it with a combination of pulling and rolling and leveraging with branches. My back was screaming. Caleb's face was gray with effort. Her arm swung loose once when we rolled her onto her side. That huge Bigfoot hand slapped the mud palm first, fingers splaying out on impact. It looked so much like a person's hand, so much like a human gesture, that I had to close my eyes for a second because it felt profoundly wrong what we were doing. It felt like we were disposing of someone, not something. Like we were giving a burial that should have been honored and witnessed and mourned properly, instead of this rushed, panicked scramble in the mud. We wrapped her in the tarp as best we could. We dragged her, both of us pulling, boots slipping in mud and moss, muscles burning to a low spot we knew about 50 yards deeper into the forest. A place where runoff collected in spring, where the ground stayed soft year-round, where standing water kept the earth from ever fully drying or hardening. Then we dug. We dug like our lives depended on it, because they did. The ground was wet, thank God for that. Rain over the past week had softened everything. We still nearly killed ourselves getting deep enough. My back lit up like fire. Old injury from years ago teaching me that at 71, I'm not supposed to be digging graves for 400-pound creatures in the rain. Caleb gagged twice, once from physical exertion, once from the smell of blood and death and panic sweat that was rising from that wrapped body, but he kept shoveling. We'd been digging for maybe 20 minutes when we heard it. A truck, slow rolling somewhere on the ridge above us, engine noise echoing strangely through the trees. Then the engine cut, doors opened, men's voices, multiple people talking at once, flashlight beams starting to cut through the early evening gloom. They were back. The hunters who'd shot her were back, and they were headed toward the original site where they'd killed the mother Bigfoot. We didn't have time to be careful anymore. We didn't have time to make this dignified or respectful or anything except fast. We got that tarp-wrapped Bigfoot body into the hole we'd dug. It wasn't deep enough we'd wanted another foot at least, but it would have to do. We started shoveling dirt back in, covering her quickly. Wet earth hitting that canvas tarp with heavy thuds. Caleb pulled back the tarp from her face and chest before we covered those parts. Looked at me with anguished eyes. "Mom said you don't bury someone like trash," he said quietly. He was right. Evelyn would have said that. Would have insisted this Bigfoot mother deserved to have her face visible to the sky for a moment before earth closed over her. So we stood there for 5 seconds. Just 5 seconds with flashlight beams getting closer above us. We stood and looked at that face. At those features that were almost human but not quite. At the peaceful expression of someone who died quickly, who hadn't suffered long. "Thank you for your baby," I whispered to her. "We'll keep him safe." Then we covered her face and finished filling the grave. We worked fast after that. Scattered the extra dirt, laid forest duff and wet leaves over the fresh earth, stomped the pattern flat with our boots to disguise the edges, dragged branches and debris over everything to break up the visual lines that might say something was buried here. By the time the hunters walked down into the original depression, cursing and arguing and swearing she'd been right there, I swear to God, we could hear them. We were standing 60 yards away in deep shadow, watching them stomp around with their flashlights. One of them, big guy, orange vest, expensive hunting rifle, was practically shouting. She was right here, right in this exact spot. I'm not crazy, Rick. I know what I saw. Then where is she, Gus? You see a 400-pound Sasquatch lying around? You see any blood? There was blood, right there. Look at that moss. It's darker, right there. That's wet moss, Gus. Everything's wet. It rained. I shot a Bigfoot. We both shot it. 3 times. It went down right here. Yeah, well, maybe it got up and walked away. Maybe it wasn't as dead as you thought. 400 pounds doesn't just walk away from 2 bullet holes in the chest, Rick. Someone took it. Someone came out here and took our Bigfoot. Our Bigfoot. He said it like that. Possessive. Like ownership. Like he'd put a down payment on a truck and someone stole it before he could drive it off the lot. I stood there in the trees with mud on my hands and my heart hammering and watched these men argue about the Bigfoot they'd killed. Watched them make plans to come back tomorrow with dogs, with more people, with better equipment to search the area. And I whispered to that fresh grave we'd just covered, "We'll take care of him. I swear to you. We'll protect your baby." That was the second time I made that promise to a dead Bigfoot mother. We kept that promise for 6 years and 4 months. Until hunters killed him too, while we listened to him call for us in the dark. We hid the baby Bigfoot in our cellar under the shop. That became his home for the next 6 years. The cellar is half concrete floor, half hard-packed earth. It stays warm year-round because of the chest freezers we run down there for storing meat. No windows. 1 heavy hatch door with a bolt lock. It's maybe 15 by 20 feet. We've always used it for storing grain in metal bins, tools we don't use often, spare parts for equipment. That became this young Bigfoot's entire world for most of his childhood. We moved the grain bins to one side, laid down bales of clean hay for insulation and softness, added old couch, cushions, quilts, blankets, anything we could find to make it comfortable. Set up a stock tank, the kind farmers use for watering cattle, so he'd always have access to water. That tank became important. This young Sasquatch drank constantly, more than any human child I've ever seen. He'd kneel beside it, cup water in his Bigfoot hand, that huge palm holding more water than any human child could manage, and slurp noisily, splashing water on his face, sometimes dunking his whole head and shaking it dry like a dog. You could tell he loved water, loved the feel of it, the sound of it, the taste of it. At first, the baby Bigfoot was in deep shock. He slept almost constantly for the first 48 hours, would wake up disoriented, panicking, making that rapid tick-tick-tick clicking sound. His eyes would go huge, searching the dim cellar light for something familiar, something that made sense. Evelyn was always there when he woke. She brought a cot down, slept in the cellar with him for those first 3 days. When he'd start to panic, she'd put both hands on his face, those huge palms that could feel the shape of his skull, the texture of the thin hair around his eyes, and she'd say softly, calmly, repeatedly, "It's okay. Mama's here. You're okay. Shh. It's okay. Mama's here." And this baby Bigfoot would hum. That hum became everything to us. That low, vibrating sound that you felt in your bones more than heard with your ears. If this young Sasquatch was humming, we knew he was okay. We knew he felt safe. We knew his stress level had come down from critical to manageable. If we didn't hear that hum, we moved. Immediately. Because no hum meant panic, meant fear, meant something was wrong in his world and he needed us to fix it. He bonded to Evelyn first and fastest. There's no other word for what happened. He imprinted on her, attached completely and immediately. She became his mother, not his human caretaker, his mother. He'd follow her with his eyes when she moved around the cellar. If she climbed the stairs to get food or supplies, his head would track her all the way to the hatch door and stay fixed on that spot until she came back. If she was gone too long, more than a few minutes, he'd start making a sound that was distinctly different from his clicking. This was a moan, low, resonant, heartbreaking, a sound that started deep in his chest and vibrated up through his throat, not loud, but penetrating. You'd hear it upstairs through the floor and through the closed hatch, and it would resonate in your teeth, in your jaw, in your skull. A Bigfoot distress call that meant, "I'm alone. I'm scared. Where is my mother? Why did she leave me?" You couldn't listen to that sound and stay calm. You couldn't hear it and ignore it. It bypassed rational thought. and went straight to primal response, to the part of your brain that says, baby in distress, baby needs help, go to baby now. Evelyn would drop whatever she was doing and go back down to the cellar. And the second he saw her, the second he confirmed she'd come back, that moan would cut off and he'd make his comfort hum instead. He learned Hannah next, which surprised all of us except Hannah. Hannah had been with us for 14 years at that point. She'd come to us at 9 years old with walls built so high and thick that it took 3 years before she'd even admit she loved us out loud. She doesn't do attachment easily. She doesn't trust easily. She'd rather push someone away first before they can leave her. This young Bigfoot didn't care about any of that. About 2 weeks in, Hannah went down to the cellar to help Evelyn change the bedding. This young Sasquatch was sitting in the corner, watching them work with those huge, intelligent eyes. Hannah was deliberately not looking at him, focusing on bunching up the old hay and spreading new, because looking directly felt too much like acknowledging, and acknowledging felt dangerous. Then he just walked over and sat down behind her. She tensed, froze, wasn't sure what to do. He wrapped those long Bigfoot arms around her shoulders from behind, not grabbing, not restraining, just wrapping, like a weighted blanket, like a hug from behind that says, you're in my pack, you're safe, I'm here. He pressed his forehead between her shoulder blades. You could feel it through her back, that slight pressure, that warmth, that vibration of his comfort hum resonating through her spine. Hannah fought it for maybe 2 seconds. I could see her shoulders tense, see her prepare to shrug him off, to maintain her distance, to not let this mean anything. Then her breathing slowed. Her shoulders dropped. And I watched my daughter, who doesn't let anyone close, who doesn't accept comfort, who's spent 14 years keeping everyone at arm's length, melt into this young Sasquatch's embrace. She reached up and put one hand on his huge Bigfoot arm, held on, leaned back into him slightly, and breathed. Just breathed, slowly, deeply, matching her breath to his breath, her heartbeat to his heartbeat, her body's rhythm to his body's rhythm. Later she told me it felt like her whole nervous system reset, like every jangling anxiety and hypervigilance and constant readiness for threat just stopped. For those few minutes, she felt completely safe in a way she hadn't felt since before she was 9 years old. He just knew, she said. He knew I was scared and he knew how to help. I don't know how he knew, but he knew. That's not animal behavior. That's emotional intelligence. That's empathy. That's the ability to read another person's emotional state and respond appropriately to help regulate them. With Caleb, it was different. This young Bigfoot loved watching Caleb work. Caleb's like me, he processes the world through his hands. If something's broken, he needs to take it apart and understand how the pieces fit together. He thinks in mechanical terms, in systems and processes, and how things function. The young Sasquatch would sit right next to him when Caleb was working on equipment in the shop above the cellar. We'd leave the hatch open so sound would carry, and this young Bigfoot would press himself against the opening, staring up through the hatch, watching Caleb's hands, watching how Caleb held tools, how he turned bolts, how he'd try something, see it didn't work, adjust his approach, try again. The problem-solving process fascinated this young Bigfoot. After a couple weeks of that, Caleb started coming down to the cellar to work on smaller projects. Carburetors he'd pulled to rebuild, sections of fence that needed welding, and this young Sasquatch would sit inches away, watching with complete focus. Caleb started handing him tools. Here, bud, hold this wrench for me. And this young Bigfoot would take it carefully in that massive hand and hold it exactly how Caleb positioned it until Caleb needed it back. Good job, bud. Thanks. Now hand me that socket. And he'd look where Caleb pointed, process which item Caleb meant, pick it up, hand it over. Caleb started calling him Little Man down in the cellar. Hey, little man, you watching? See this part here? This is the jet, controls fuel flow. You want to hold it? And this young Sasquatch would hum with pleasure at being included, at being useful, at being part of Caleb's work. That name stuck, Little Man. Inside our family, in the privacy of our home and that cellar, he was Little Man. We never used a human name. We never called him anything that might slip out accidentally in public. He was just Little Man. For me, the bonding came through routine, through consistency. I'd go down to the cellar every evening after the day's work was done. I'd bring a cup of coffee for me, and a bowl of whatever Evelyn had made for dinner, for him stew usually, or roasted meat, vegetables cooked soft. And I'd read to him. I'd pull out my old field guides from when I was teaching. Birds of the Pacific Northwest. Mammals of North America, Trees and Plants of the Cascade Range. Big books with pictures and descriptions and range maps, and I'd read to this young Bigfoot in a low, steady voice. Not performing, not trying to make it dramatic or engaging, just reading. Giving him my voice, giving him the sound of language, even if he couldn't understand the specific words. He'd sit next to my leg, always my left leg for some reason. He'd press his shoulder against my knee and lean into me. Sometimes, he'd put his big Bigfoot hand on my ankle, wrapping those long fingers around to hold on, and he'd hum that comfort sound. Soft, continuous, like purring but deeper, more resonant. I could feel it through my leg, feel it vibrating up through my bones. Sometimes he'd fall asleep like that, head heavy against my thigh, breathing deep and slow, one hand still circled around my ankle like he needed the physical connection, even in sleep, to know I wasn't going to leave. Tell me that's just an animal. Tell me that's instinct and nothing more. I'll call you a liar. This young Sasquatch understood words. Not all of them, not perfectly, but he understood more than any dog I've ever known. He understood tone, absolutely. He understood good better than anything else. Say good to him, good job, buddy, or that's good, or just good, and he'd light up. His face would change. His body language would change. That hum would get stronger, happier, more enthusiastic. He loved praise, loved approval, loved knowing he'd done something right. He learned our names shockingly fast. Evelyn, Hannah, Caleb, Tom. He'd look directly at whoever had been named, turn his whole body toward them. That wasn't coincidence or pattern recognition. That was language comprehension. That was understanding that specific sound combinations referred to specific individuals. And we taught him quiet game. Quiet game was survival. Quiet game kept him alive. Quiet game was the reason we were able to hide a baby Bigfoot for 6 years without anyone finding out. Here's how it worked. One of us would put our hand over our own mouth, make deliberate eye contact with him, say quietly but firmly, quiet game. Then, we'd stay frozen. No sound, no movement except breathing. He took that game deadly seriously, more seriously than any human child would take a game. Because I think on some level, even as young as he was, he understood this wasn't play. This was survival training. This was his mother's lessons translated into new context. When we said quiet game, he would immediately press his own Bigfoot hand over his mouth. Hold it there even though I could see the effort it took, see him shaking with the strain of staying still. He'd stop humming instantly, stop clicking, stop making any sound at all, and he'd freeze, completely freeze. Eyes locked on whoever had initiated the game, body rigid with concentration, barely breathing. We practiced quiet game every single day, sometimes multiple times a day, sometimes for just 10 seconds, sometimes for a full minute, building his endurance, building his understanding that when we said those words, his life might depend on total silence. Because people were looking for the Bigfoot those hunters claimed they'd shot, and quiet game was all that stood between this young Sasquatch living or being discovered. Word had spread through town about Gus and his hunting buddies shooting a Bigfoot up on our ridge. At first, it was just bar talk, the kind of story that gets told over beers and everyone laughs and calls you drunk or crazy. Gus says he shot Bigfoot out past the Reed place.